the heart of California's Central Valley, Yuba City sits nestled among sprawling farmlands. It's a place where everyone knows their neighbors, where life moves at a steady pace. But on February 24th, this quiet town became the starting point of one of America's most baffling mysteries. 30-year-old Jack Madruga climbed into his prized 1969 Mercury Montego. The turquoise paint gleamed under the streetlights as he set out to pick up his 4 friends. Little did Jack know, this routine drive would be the beginning of a journey that would puzzle investigators for decades to come. Jack's first stop was at William Sterling's house. At 29, William was deeply religious, often spending his free time reading to patients in mental hospitals. His kind heart and gentle spirit made him a favorite among his friends and family. As he settled into the passenger seat, he and Jack chatted about their plans for the night ahead. Next came Jackie Hewitt, the youngest of the group at 24. Jackie was known for his innocent smile and his need for help with simple tasks like dialing phone numbers. Despite his challenges, Jackie's friends always made sure he felt included and valued. Theodore Weiher, 32, was waiting on his porch when Jack pulled up. The oldest of the group, Ted was known for his big heart but lack of common sense. His brother once recalled how Ted had spent over $100 on pencils for no apparent reason. But his friends loved him for his quirks and his unwavering loyalty. The final stop was at Gary Mathias' home. At 25, Gary was the only one in the group without an intellectual disability. However, he battled severe schizophrenia, a condition that had led to his discharge from a brief stint in the Army. Despite his struggles, Gary had been doing well lately, taking his medication regularly and staying out of trouble. These 5 men, affectionately known around town as the Boys, were more than just friends. They were teammates on the Gateway Gators, a basketball team that was part of a local program, helping them learn job skills and navigate their daily challenges. Tonight was special. They were heading to Chico State to watch a basketball game before their own big match the next day. As they drove towards Chico, the car filled with excited chatter about sports, their favorite players, and predictions for the game ahead. The unseasonably cold February air nipped at their faces through the open windows, but their enthusiasm warmed the atmosphere inside the Mercury Montego. At 10 p.m., the game at Chico State ended. UC Davis had won the game, much to the delight of the Boys, who considered them their favorite team. Riding high on the excitement of the game, they decided to stop at a local convenience store called Bear's to grab some celebratory snacks. The clerk at Bear's, eager to close up shop for the night, watched with mild annoyance as the 5 friends loaded up on treats. A Hostess cherry pie, a lemon pie, a Snickers bar, a Marathon bar, a couple of Pepsis, and a quart of milk made their way to the counter. The clerk had no way of knowing that he would be one of the last people to see these 5 young men alive. What happened next has puzzled investigators, family members, and amateur sleuths for years. Rather than heading south on Highway 99 towards home, the Mercury Montego took a different route, east. The Boys drove into the mountains, taking the Oroville-Quincy Highway deep into Plumas National Forest. As they ventured further into the wilderness, the road became increasingly treacherous. Snow began to fall, softly at first, then with increasing intensity. The headlights of the Montego cut through the darkness, illuminating a world of white. Eventually, the car could go no further, becoming stuck on a snowy mountain road, miles from anywhere familiar. Back in Yuba City, worried parents waited. When morning came and the Boys hadn't returned, panic began to set in. Calls were made to local hospitals and police stations. Friends were contacted, but no one had seen or heard from Jack, William, Jackie, Theodore, or Gary. As hours turned into days, the worry transformed into full-blown fear. The mothers of Ted Weiher and William Sterling reached out to the police, pleading for help in finding their children. It was completely out of character for any of them, let alone all 5, to be away from home for so long without contact. The police, initially skeptical due to the men's ages, soon realized the seriousness of the situation. A missing persons report was filed, and search efforts began in earnest. But where to start? The last confirmed sighting of the men had been at the Bears convenience store in Chico, but beyond that, their whereabouts were a complete mystery. It wasn't until Tuesday, 4 days after their disappearance, that the first significant clue emerged. A forest ranger scouting the area near Elk's Retreat spotted an abandoned turquoise Mercury Montego. The location was shocking, a staggering 2.5 hours from where the basketball game had taken place. When investigators arrived at the scene, they were puzzled by what they found. The car was in remarkably excellent condition, especially considering the rough terrain. It was unlocked, the window was down, and snack wrappers littered the seats. The gas tank was a quarter full. Most perplexingly, the vehicle wasn't actually stuck anymore. It was as if the boys had simply walked away from a perfectly functional car. For the next 5 days, search teams scoured the region. The harsh winter conditions made the search incredibly difficult and dangerous. Thick snow blanketed the ground, obscuring any tracks or signs of the missing men. The dense forest and rugged terrain challenged even the most experienced search and rescue teams. Joseph Shawns, a man from Sacramento who owned a cabin in the area, came forward with a strange story. He claimed to have been in the area on the night of February 24th, getting his own car stuck while scouting back roads. Sean said he had suffered a heart attack and spent a miserable night in his car. But it was what Sean said he saw that night that added another layer of mystery to the case. He claimed to have seen 2 sets of headlights and heard the voices of what appeared to be a woman and a baby, as well as a group of men. When he called out for help, Sean said the lights went dark and the voices fell silent. Later that night, Sean's reported seeing flashlights in the distance. Again, his calls for help went unanswered. In the early hours of the morning, Sean's managed to walk to a lodge where he received medical attention. On his journey, he passed by the abandoned Mercury Montego but thought nothing of it at the time. As the days passed, hope began to fade. The harsh weather conditions forced the search teams to suspend their efforts until the snow melted in spring. For the families of the missing men, it was an agonizing wait. Months passed with no new leads. Then on June 4th, a group of motorcyclists made a chilling discovery. They discovered a strong, unpleasant odor emanating from an abandoned Forest Service trailer near Bucks Lake, approximately 19 miles from the location of the car. What they found inside the trailer would shock the community and reignite the investigation. It was Ted Weiher's body, almost unrecognizable after months in the wilderness. He had lost nearly half his body weight and grown a full beard. Starvation and exposure to the elements were the official causes of death. But the discovery raised more questions than it answered. The trailer contained ample provisions, enough food to sustain all 5 men for months. Yet only a dozen cans had been opened. A heating source was available but unused. Ted's shoes were missing, and his feet showed signs of frostbite. It was as if he had simply laid down and allowed himself to die, despite having the means to survive at his fingertips. The grim discovery spurred a renewed search effort. Over the next few days, more heartbreaking finds were made. About 5 miles south of the trailer, authorities discovered the bodies of Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga. Jack still had the keys to his Mercury in his pocket. Their remains showed signs of having been partially eaten by animals. Soon after, searchers found articles of clothing belonging to Jackie Hewitt and eventually his remains, a couple of miles northeast of the trailer. Nearby, they discovered Forest Service blankets and flashlights lying by the road, suggesting that Jackie and Gary Mathias might have stayed with Ted in the trailer for some time before venturing out. But the biggest mystery remained unsolved. What happened to Gary Mathias? His tennis shoes were found in the trailer with Ted, but his body was never discovered. To this day, his disappearance remains an open missing persons case. As investigators pieced together the evidence, more questions arose. Why did the boys drive into the mountains instead of going home? Why did they abandon a car that could have easily been unstuck? Did they see something that night that scared them into hiding? Some theories pointed to Gary Mathias as the key to the mystery. His friend resided in Forbestown, a short distance from the location of the car's discovery. Did he convince the others to take a detour that went horribly wrong? Or was there a darker explanation? Jack Madruga's mother was convinced that something sinister had happened. They wouldn't have fled off into the woods like a bunch of quail, she told reporters. We know good and well that someone made them do it. The Yuba County Five's case captured the nation. Television shows, newspapers, and numerous internet forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries featured the Yuba County Five. Amateur sleuths pored over the details, proposing theories ranging from government conspiracy to alien abduction. But for the families of Jack, William, Jackie, Theodore, and Gary, the mystery was deeply personal. They had lost sons, brothers, and friends. The lack of knowledge was a wound that never fully healed. As the years have passed, the Yuba County Five case has become a legend, a story that defies easy explanation. It serves as a reminder of the unpredictability of life and how a simple night out can turn into a decades-long tragedy. Today, the forests of Plumas County still hold their secrets. Somewhere out there, the remains of Gary Mathias may still lie undiscovered, and the full truth of what happened on that cold February night remains hidden. A reminder that sometimes reality can be stranger and more tragic than any fiction. The story of Jack, William, Jackie, Theodore, and Gary continues to captivate and puzzle. It's a mystery that speaks to our deepest fears about the unknown, as well as our fascination with the inexplicable. As long as questions remain unanswered, the case of the Yuba County Five will continue to haunt us, a testament to the enduring power of an unsolved mystery. In Yuba City, 5 empty chairs at family dinner serve as silent reminders of the boys who never came home. The wind whispers through the trees and the mountains of Plumas National Forest, carrying the echoes of an unsolvable mystery. The chilling tale of Goatman's Bridge traces its origins to a tragedy rooted in cruelty and injustice. According to local legend, a black goat farmer named Oscar Washburn, along with his family, settled in a home just north of the old Alton Bridge. Over time, Oscar became known as a reliable and hard-working man, earning the respect of his community. His skill in raising goats earned him the nickname the Goatman, a title bestowed upon him with warmth and admiration. But not everyone in North Texas was pleased to see a black man thrive. A group of Klansmen who held positions in the local government harbored deep resentment toward Oscar's success. For years, they waited for an excuse to act against him, their hatred simmering beneath the surface. That summer, their opportunity came. Unaware of the growing conspiracy, Oscar innocently placed a sign on the old Alton Bridge that read, "This way to the Goatmans," directing visitors to his farm. The Klansmen, seizing this harmless act, exploited their positions of power. Under the guise of legality, they quickly passed a law banning solicitation on the bridge. Oscar faced arrest in August 1938 for violating this recently established rule. However, this arrest was no mere legal matter. It was a calculated move by the Klansmen to exact their revenge. Rather than taking Oscar through the proper channels of justice, they assembled a mob and set their sights on ending his life. Late one night, they stormed across the bridge, kidnapping Oscar from his home in a violent frenzy. The mob dragged him to the old Alton Bridge, where they had prepared a noose. Without a shred of mercy, they secured the rope around Oscar's neck and threw him over the side of the bridge, intending to hang him. But when the mob looked over to confirm that Oscar had perished, they were met with a horrifying surprise. The noose was empty. Oscar had vanished. Panic swept through the mob. They had no explanation for his disappearance. Some say Oscar escaped into the woods, while others believe something far more supernatural took place that night. Whatever the truth, the Klansmen fled in terror, leaving the bridge shrouded in mystery. Since then, the bridge has come to be known as Goatman's Bridge, with the legend suggesting it was named in honor of Oscar Washburn's spirit. To this day, no one knows for certain how he managed to escape, or if he even escaped at all. Some say that Oscar's spirit haunts the bridge, seeking justice for the wrong done to him. Others believe that his disappearance is just another chapter in the bridge's long, eerie history. What remains clear is that Goatman's Bridge stands as a symbol of both man's cruelty and the enduring strength of a name that will not be forgotten. Folklore claims that certain bridges are home to unsettling creatures like trolls, but Old Alton Bridge is home to something far more sinister, a creature known as a Goatman. Witnesses describe this terrifying figure as nothing short of horrifying, plucked from the darkest corners of nightmares and legend. Standing at a towering 8 feet, the Goatman's appearance is a grotesque fusion of man and beast. His muscular chest and arms resemble those of a man, while his lower half bears the hooved feet and hindquarters of a goat. His most chilling feature, though, is his head, a menacing goat skull adorned with massive, curled horns and glowing eyes that pierce through the darkness. Eyewitness accounts vary in the details of his fur. Some say it burns a deep, fiery red, while others claim it is so black that he seems to dissolve into the shadows of the surrounding trees. Whatever his form, there's one constant. The Goatman leaves terror in his wake. Whenever the Goatman is sighted, a trail of mysterious disappearances seems to follow. Some legends claim that he lies dormant for years, only emerging to hunt for fresh prey. Other versions suggest a chilling connection between the monster and his name. According to local lore, anyone who dares to speak the Goatman's name while crossing the bridge summons him from his slumber. By day, the Goatman supposedly sleeps beneath the old Alton Bridge, but at night, he prowls for unsuspecting victims. People say that speaking his name during daylight hours awakens him, making him even more vicious as he seeks revenge for his disturbed rest. The old Alton Bridge, not just any other haunted bridge, is believed to be a gateway to hell itself. Visitors who dare to cross at exactly 3 a.m. have reported terrifying visions of fire and brimstone, as though the underworld is trying to reach through the very fabric of reality. The few who return from these crossings speak of a horrifying brush with something beyond human comprehension. The Goatman isn't the only spirit haunting this infamous bridge either. People often describe a second ghost there as a young mother. Many of those who cross the bridge at night have heard her cries, filled with grief and despair. Some have even reported seeing her standing in the middle of the bridge, weeping for her lost child, only to vanish as they approach. According to legend, a tale of unspeakable horror connects this tragic figure and the Goatman. Long ago, the Goatman is said to have stolen her infant child. Overcome with grief and rage, the young mother threw herself from the bridge, and ever since, her tormented spirit has wandered its planks, eternally searching for the baby she lost to the monster beneath. Whether the Goatman is a demon, a lost soul, or something altogether unexplainable, one thing is certain: Old Alton Bridge is not a place for the faint of heart. Old Alton Bridge is not only famous for the Goatman legend, but also for the unsettling, unexplained phenomena that many have experienced firsthand. Visitors have reported seeing strange lights flickering in the woods surrounding the bridge, as if something is lurking just beyond the trees. Others speak of an eerie sensation, as though invisible hands are grabbing at them in the dark. Some even claim to have been pelted by small stones while crossing the bridge, though no source for the rain of rocks is ever found. These bizarre occurrences have attracted the attention of paranormal investigators from all over, drawn by the sheer volume of mysterious sightings and experiences. From ghostly encounters to strange physical sensations, the old Alton Bridge has cemented its reputation as one of Texas' most haunted locations. Whether the bridge is named after a terrifying demon or in honor of a resilient goat farmer who evaded a tragic fate, Old Alton Bridge offers a unique experience for those brave enough to visit. It's not just a destination for ghost hunters. Nature lovers will appreciate the serene beauty of the surrounding landscape. The historic structure is a perfect spot for a hike or a photo, with picturesque scenery around every corner. But remember, if you decide to cross Old Alton Bridge, be careful not to do so after 3 a.m. That's when the real mysteries are said to unfold. A peculiar and tragic phenomenon has haunted the picturesque village of Dumbarton, Scotland, since the 1950s. An unassuming bridge, known as Overtown Bridge, has become infamous for a series of inexplicable events, dogs seemingly leaping to their deaths. This mystery has puzzled locals and experts alike for decades. Overtown Bridge, part of the sprawling Overtown estate, stands as a testament to 19th century Scottish baronial architecture, built by the industrialist White family. Its 3 grand arches span 15 meters above a deep ravine. For a century, the bridge was nothing more than a scenic crossing. However, the 1950s marked the beginning of a disturbing trend that would forever change its legacy. Reports of dogs suddenly jumping off the bridge began to circulate through the village. What started as isolated incidents soon became a pattern too stark to ignore. Over the years, the toll has been staggering. Over the years, reports indicate that 50 dogs have perished and approximately 600 more have jumped but survived. In a tragic human incident, a man suffering from paranoid schizophrenia threw his newborn son from the bridge in 1994. Pet owners describe a chilling transformation in their dogs' moments before the jumps. Some dogs become unnaturally still, as if sensing an unseen presence, while others grow visibly agitated. Many appear to fixate on something invisible before suddenly bolting. Survivors of these jumps often bear physical and psychological scars, with broken bones and apparent trauma. It's crucial to understand that animals do not commit suicide in the human sense. They lack the cognitive ability to make such a deliberate choice. While animals may exhibit self-destructive behaviors, these are typically symptoms of underlying issues like disease or parasites. The Overtown Bridge phenomenon demands a more practical explanation. Several theories have emerged to explain this mysterious behavior. Initially, some suggested nearby submarines emitted frequencies that drove dogs to madness. Since then, debunkers have refuted this theory. According to local legends, a ghostly white lady lures dogs to their doom or demonic possessions. Some visitors report an inexplicable sense of dread on the bridge. Animal behaviorist David Sands proposes a more scientific explanation. He suggests that a combination of factors contributes to the phenomenon. Minks, which began breeding in the area in the 1950s, emit a strong, enticing odor. Dogs, especially those with longer snouts, are particularly attracted to the scent. The lush vegetation surrounding the bridge creates an optical illusion, making it difficult for dogs to perceive the true depth of the ravine. Sand's theory offers the most comprehensive and rational explanation for the tragic events at Overtown Bridge. It suggests that when dogs catch the scent of minks, they instinctively rush towards it, unaware of the perilous drop that awaits them. This case serves as a sobering reminder of the complex interplay between animal instincts and human-made environments. Even though we may never fully solve the mystery of Overtown Bridge, we can prevent future tragedies and safeguard our beloved canine companions through ongoing research and awareness. In December of 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers stationed on an isolated group of islands in the North Atlantic vanished without trace. Was their disappearance the result of a freak accident, or was there something more sinister at work? Join us as we recount the still unsolved mystery of the Flannan Isles. There was a sharp intake of breath from the ship's crew as the looming specter of Alan Moore emerged from the mist. The towering cliffs of this small islet were an imposing sight to behold, no matter how many times one encountered them. Beneath their feet, the vibration of the engine seemed to dampen as the vessel slowed its approach. Standing at the prow, a lone figure kept his eyes fixed on the lighthouse jutting from the summit of this brooding landmass, which was little more than a silhouette beneath the veil of fog. That in itself was a concern. In these conditions, it should have been lit. The man's name was Joseph Moore, a lighthouse keeper from the Isle of Lewis. It had been 6 long days since he had received orders from the Northern Lighthouse Board to return to his post at Alan Moore. He had hurriedly made his way to the harbor at Brestcleat, where the Hesperus had been waiting to take him to the nearby Flannan Isles. But poor weather conditions had prevented them from sailing until this morning. For him, the journey had been an anxious one. He had spent the majority of the trip in deep thought, pacing fore and aft across the ship's deck. Any attempts to engage him in conversation had been met with little more than grunts or nods, and he had refused breakfast, taking only a few mugs of coffee for sustenance. The reports had clearly troubled him. As soon as he had heard about the lighthouse having been dark since the 15th of December, he had had an unshakable feeling in the pit of his stomach that something had gone terribly wrong. It was not a possibility. He was quite ready to accept. The 3 men stationed on the islet, rising from the waves in front of him, were not just his colleagues, they were his friends. As the ship approached the east side of the island, an ominous atmosphere descended over the scene. The Flannan Isles had a haunting loneliness to them at the best of times, somewhat punctuated by the fierceness of the seas around them. But on this morning, as the Hespers came about, there was something else in the air, something not quite right. Captain Harvey had noticed immediately that the ensign was not flying on the flagstaff. And when Joseph Moore had also made the point that none of the provision boxes had been put out to be restocked, and that there was no welcoming party from either of the 3 men he had been sent to relieve, the eeriness was suddenly amplified beyond words. 3 long blasts on the ship's foghorn split the air as Harvey attempted to notify the lighthouse keepers of their arrival. When this failed to elicit a response, he ordered that the crew set off a signal rocket from the deck below. But still there was no reply from the 3 men, save for the crashing of waves against the cliff faces and the cawing of seagulls overhead. An oppressive silence hung over the island in front of them, which sat heavy in the heart of Joseph Moore. A short time later, a crewman by the name of McCormick approached him. He explained that the captain had ordered the 2 of them to take the ship's launch across to the east landing and to report their findings. As the relief keeper made his way towards the waiting boat, he couldn't have known it at the time, but he was about to step into one of the world's most haunting and enduring mysteries. Every day across the globe, people go missing in their thousands. Thankfully, most turn up alive and well. For others not so fortunate, their remains are often found weeks, months, or even years later, having perished through misadventure or foul play. But every so often there are cases in which the missing individuals are never to be seen or heard from again. They simply disappear into the vastness of the world we inhabit. Vanishings like this occur in both urban and rural settings. But in either case, there are often more obvious explanations. After all, there are plenty of sinister people with sinister motives, just waiting to take advantage of any given opportunity. But what about more isolated incidents, such as one where a group of individuals stationed on a remote, uninhabited, and almost inaccessible island, miles away from the evils of the world, simply vanish without trace? On the evening of December 7th, 1900, almost 3 weeks before the Hespers arrived at the Flannans, Superintendent Robert Muirhead stepped off the east landing of Allen Moor and climbed into his waiting launch. Having shook hands and bid farewell to his colleagues, he now headed out to a larger steam vessel anchored offshore, which would take him back to the mainland. As a small boat made its way over the choppy waters, he looked back at 2 of the 3 men he had left behind. They were 43-year-old James Duckett and 28-year-old Thomas Marshall, who stood on the east landing waving to him. The third man, 40-year-old Donald MacArthur, was atop the cliffs towering above them, manning the lighthouse as procedure dictated. It was strictly forbidden to leave the light unattended at any time, and so he could not join his colleagues in waving off their supervisor. Muirhead never considered that he would be the last to see these men again, as the relief vessel arrived 19 days later, leaving them unaccounted for. The Flannan Isles, a group of 7 small islets situated some 20 miles west of the Outer Hebrides in western Scotland, were to be the setting of this strange disappearance. The islands themselves were named after the 7th century Irish priest Saint Flannan, and for as long as anyone could remember, they had remained uninhabited. The settlers on the neighboring Isle of Lewis and the rest of the Hebrides always viewed this bleak and deserted group of craggy rocks with great superstition. Over the years, many fishing boats and merchant vessels had settled there, and although the Hebrideans often ferried sheep to graze on the Flannans' lush turf, they believed it very unlucky to spend a night there. During the 1890s, the Northern Lighthouse Board decided to construct a lighthouse on Island Moor, the largest of these 7 islets. The tempestuousness of the wild Atlantic Ocean constantly hampered the building work, which took 4 years. Nevertheless, the lighthouse was completed and went into operation on the 7th of December, 1899. The lighthouse lacked wireless communication, relying solely on visual signals visible to the Hebrides on a clear day to communicate with the mainland. Up to 3 men would have operated the lighthouse at once, with a 4th rotating in as relief. The mystery began on the night of December 15th, 1900, when a sudden squall broke out near the islands. The first signs of anything amiss came when the captain of an American steamer, the SS Archdor, making its way from Philadelphia to the port of Leith in Edinburgh, passed close to Allen Moor just before midnight and noticed that the lighthouse was eerily dark. This was almost unheard of for an operational rock station like the one on the Flannans, and it was reported when the ship reached its destination 3 days later. Despite the alarming sight of a dark lighthouse, the harsh weather prevented any immediate action. The Hesperus was due to set sail on December 20th, carrying fresh supplies and relief keeper Joseph Moore. But because of the unfavorable conditions, it was unable to set out until dawn on Boxing Day, the 26th. As Moore and McCormick reached the East Landing, Moore instructed his colleague to wait below, while he made his way up the steps leading to the plateau where the lighthouse stood. As he negotiated the steep incline, Moore called out to the 3 men, but there was no reply. Upon reaching the lighthouse, he discovered that the entrance gate to the compound and main door were both closed. Inside, nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary. The men had cleaned and refilled the lamps, unmade the beds as if they had just awoken, finished the washing up, and left cold ashes in the grate. After his initial observations, he spotted an overturned chair in the kitchen and then noticed that all the clocks had stopped, which only added to his concerns. Returning to the Hesperus, Moore relayed his findings to the captain, then made his way back up to the lighthouse with more men in the hopes of conducting a wider search. Everything was intact at the East Landing, but the West Landing showed significant damage from recent storms. They had smashed a box at 110 feet above sea level and scattered its contents. The iron railway by the path was wrenched out of its concrete housing, and a rock weighing more than a ton had been displaced above that. On top of the cliff, at more than 200 feet above sea level, turf had been ripped away as far as 10 meters from the cliff edge. Further investigation revealed that the keepers had kept their log until 9 a.m. on December 15th, and their entries made it clear that the damage had occurred before their disappearance. The only other noteworthy piece of evidence was that 2 sets of oil skins were missing. Only 1 set of the outdoor gear remained by the entrance, suggesting that one of the men must have ventured outside without wearing his protective clothing. This was surprising given the severity of the weather on the date of the last log entry, particularly during a harsh North Atlantic winter. There was no sign of the keepers themselves, either inside the lighthouse or anywhere else on the island. They had simply vanished. More than 3 volunteer seamen stayed behind to attend to the duties of getting the lighthouse back up and running, while the Hesperus returned to the shore station at Brestcleat. From there, Captain Harvey sent a telegram to the Northern Lighthouse Board on December 26, 1900, stating, "A dreadful accident has occurred at the Flannans. The island's 3 keepers, Ducat Marshall and the Occasional, have disappeared. The stoppage of the clocks and other signs suggest that the accident occurred approximately a week ago. The poor fellows must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned while trying to secure a crane, or something similar." Whatever the cause of the keeper's mysterious disappearance was, several embellishments have been added over the years, such as the classic half-eaten meal, which was supposedly found on the keeper's kitchen table. This is common in so many vanishing tales, but in this case, it is a complete fabrication. People have questioned the overturned chair, despite the original accounts, without mentioning it. Some find it intriguing that the clocks are stopped, but this is normal. It was necessary to wind all clocks of that era to keep them ticking. With no one around to do this, they inevitably ceased to function. The log entries, listed as follows, represent another point of contention. December 12th. The wind blew from the north to the northwest. The sea lashed in fury. I have never witnessed a storm like this before. Waves are very high, tearing at the lighthouse. Everything ship. James Ducat, irritable. Later on the 12th, storm still raging. Wind steady. Storm bound. Cannot go out. Ship passing sounding foghorn. Could see lights of cabins. Ducat quiet. Donald MacArthur crying. December 13th. Storm continued through night. Wind shifted west by north. Duckett quiet. MacArthur praying. Later on the 13th noon. Gray daylight. Me, Duckett, and MacArthur prayed. There was no log entry on the 14th. They supposedly chalked the final entry on a piece of slate, which would normally have been transferred to the logbook at a later time. Without being mostly fictional, these entries would have been disturbing to read. The reports on the weather are probably true, but the comments regarding the keeper's mental states do not make any sense when considering the context. A Northern Lighthouse Board logbook is an official, process-bound document. It is not a diary for an employee to record his personal thoughts, especially regarding other members of the team. It seems rather odd to suggest that Marshall would have written such statements about James Duckett. Duckett was Marshall's superior, and it would have been today's equivalent of an employee writing on an office message board or official report that their boss was in a foul mood. Had the men survived, the Northern Lighthouse Board would have rightly asked Marshall to explain why he had written such personal remarks. The comment about MacArthur crying is also completely out of character. He had a reputation for being a tough old sea dog. In fact, all three men were highly seasoned and rather hardy. It was a prerequisite for the job. Thus, the idea of them cowering under a violent storm, which they would have seen often around the Flannans, insults their memories. Finally, there is no mention of the damage recorded at the West Landing, which was present in the original logbook entries. Joseph Moore traces the origins of these false additions back to a 1921 American pulp magazine, published many years after the incident. This was perhaps a harmless attempt by the publication to add more intrigue to the mystery, but it has ultimately become confused with fact. Regardless, the search yielded no bodies or other clues, leaving us to conjecture about the true events on those windswept isles in that frigid December of the 19th century. Theories have ranged from mundane to extreme, with the most fantastical mentioning sea monsters, boats filled with phantoms, kidnappings by foreign spies, and even aliens. There are 2 or 3 more rational explanations, however, and one of these involves the occasional keeper, Donald MacArthur. Some have suggested that, despite the fictitious log entries, MacArthur's mood at the time was highly irritable. He was not a full-time lightkeeper, accustomed to spending only a few weeks on station at a time. He worked at the Flannans. He was covering for an assistant lightkeeper by the name of William Ross, who was on long-term sick leave and who, incidentally, would quite literally drop dead in the lightroom of the Alenglass Lighthouse 16 months to the day after the tragedy at Allamore. As a result, MacArthur had already spent most of October, all of November, and the beginning of December on the Flannans by the time Superintendent Robert Muirhead visited them on the 7th day of that month. The fact that a superintendent took the trouble to visit the keepers at such a remote station in the middle of December is quite unprecedented, and suggests that he did so because there were issues brewing between the men. It is highly likely that Muirhead made the trip to calm the situation and assure MacArthur that he would be relieved on the 20th by Joseph Moore. In MacArthur's eyes, though, this simply translated that he would have to spend yet another 2 weeks away from his family. It is not difficult to imagine what may have transpired from this situation. Some have suggested that MacArthur possibly suffered a bout of cabin fever and took the lives of Marshall and Duckett. He then threw their bodies and himself from the cliffs rather than face the consequences of his actions. There was little, if any, evidence of any kind of struggle inside the lighthouse. This line of thinking implies that MacArthur lured the other 2 men to their deaths outside. A prominent theory proposes that a freak wave carried the men away. It postulates that Marshall and Duckett had gone to secure some of the damaged equipment at the West Landing, leaving MacArthur to man the lighthouse. A box containing mooring ropes and other essential items was apparently wedged in a fish on the cliffs at 110 feet, and it is believed that one of the men got into trouble trying to retrieve it. A freak wave caught all 3 of them off guard, and the other man with him rushed back to the lighthouse, seeking assistance from MacArthur. Whilst this is probably the most convincing explanation, it is not without its flaws. First of all, the log entries clearly indicate that the disappearance occurred in the late afternoon on the 15th. As time has passed, Many lightkeepers have questioned why Duckett would have left it so late in the day to try and retrieve the box of supplies, especially with the fading light and deteriorating weather conditions. They agree that any lightkeeper worth their salt would have carried out this task in the morning. Duckett had more than 20 years of experience to call upon, and was by all accounts one of the best lightkeepers in the service. So why would he have unnecessarily risked his life, and those of his subordinates, when 30 to 40 foot waves hammered the west landing and the wind was building up to just below storm force? Keith McCloskey, in his book The Lighthouse, proposes a relatively new theory regarding the wind, suggesting that it might have been a vortex. Strong winds on the Flannans have lifted many lightkeepers off their feet and carried them for a long distance. They built the Allen Moore Lighthouse on slope ground. The wall around the complex is lower on the west side than at ground level in front of the winch house, which means it offers no protection from westerly winds and causes something of a wind tunnel effect through this narrow passageway. McCloskey speculates that strong winds on the afternoon of December 15th could have resulted in shutters or doors around the complex to bang and slam, and that two of the men donned their oilskins and ventured out to remedy the situation. As soon as they turned the corner from the living quarters into the area immediately in front of the winch house, a high wind may have carried them over the low wall and then straight over the 200-foot cliffs to the north of the lighthouse, which are only 15 to 20 feet away. He goes on to say that the third man may have gone out to investigate when his colleagues did not return, not bothering to put on his oilskins because he wouldn't have been outside for too long, only to turn around and suffer the same fate. But if this is the case, why didn't any other lightkeepers stationed on the Flannans throughout the subsequent years also succumb to this strange weather phenomenon? Surely it wasn't so unique that it only ever occurred once. The riddle of the Flannan Isles has been an endless source of fascination, one that has inspired stories, films, poems, songs, and even an opera. But the whole truth may never be known. Something about the mystery of these three men, isolated at the edge of the civilized world and surrounded by the vast and hostile Atlantic Ocean, not only sends a chill up the spine, but it tugs at the heartstrings. They promised their families they would return over Christmas, but they never returned. James Duckett was married with 4 children, MacArthur married with 2, and while Marshall was single at the time of the disappearance, he must have sired children at some point in his life. As there are descendants of his alive today, there would be no closure for their loved ones. They would only experience heartbreak and confusion. The lighthouse itself remained manned and without incident until 1971, when it became fully automated. It is still in operation to this day, and the islands are now only visited occasionally for maintenance purposes. Over the years, the islands never could quite live up to their cursed reputation, as nothing out of the ordinary ever took place there again. But the mystery of Allen Moore lives on, perhaps forevermore. In closing, we leave you with the words of Superintendent Robert Muirhead, who, in his official report of the 8th of January 1901, said of the keepers, "I visited them as lately as the 7th of December, and have the melancholy recollection that I was the last person to shake hands with them and bid them farewell."